leaking top insider stock trades every day until they stop us. Remember, 90% of insider filings are totally useless. You have to dig into these insider trades to understand whether they're scheduled or unscheduled, abnormal or just typical trades, etc. Specifically, you'll remember that we are looking for unscheduled, so we're ignoring things like tax sales, dividend reinvestment, employee stock purchase plans. Abnormal ones, so unusual timing or flipping from consistently buying the stock to selling the stock. Of course, the best thing is if an insider has a history of success, they have a track record of buying before the stock goes up or selling before the stock falls. And then also the size and quantity of the trades matter as well. If multiple insiders are buying, or if it's an abnormally large buy or sell, that's also notable. And then price action can be useful too, to see if they're buying the dip, selling the rip, buying into momentum, etc. So let's start by just looking at the daily sales. We did actually have a higher overall number of sales come in, or buys and sells come in, but it was pretty much all on the selling front. Insiders purchases remained pretty low and continued to go down since the beginning of August. Of course, that means that the daily percent of insider trades that are buys is very low, coming in below 10%, which is the first time we've had it that low in quite a while. Now, the weekly numbers, we're still early in the week, and on top of that, we're not early in the week, but because of Labor Day, it's going to, we're going to have fewer insider trades this week because we lost a day, so this isn't going to be very useful, but we can look down here and see that the percent of insider trades over the week is going to be very low, which the last time it was this low was back in July, but July is earnings season, and typically speaking, earnings season has much lower insider purchases because they're in blackout periods, so they can't make discretionary purchases. So because of that, if they have a 10b5-1 plan or some sort of scheduled selling plan on, it can continue to sell, but they can't just they can't just choose to buy the stock, make a discretionary purchase. So most earnings seasons, you'll see that number dip. However, it's very, very notable when that number does not dip, like in April of this year, where basically the second insiders got out of their blackout periods, they were rushing to buy the stock. And so when you see massive buyings during earnings season, it's very, very notable. So outside of that time frame, most of these are going to be earnings season. You got October, we're going to have January somewhere in here. Right here, the January is low. But outside of that, at the end of 2024, we saw some pretty low numbers. We did also for a week there at the beginning of 2025. So obviously the end of 2024 and beginning of 2025, stock market was pretty rough. So we'll see. This is just really 1 week. Last week was also a little low, but this is 1 week of really low. So we'll see what the insider purchasing continues to look like here over the next couple of weeks. But now let's go take a look at the insider buys and sells. We're going to start with the sells today, so we'll set this to sale. We're at CEOWatcher.com, of course. We'll get the most recent filings that are put up there. I like to, as you know, make the insider returns a little bit longer term, and then we'll sort by transaction value and just go through some of these large transactions here. So let's just do a quick run through the tickers to see if there's any that catch our eye or that we've seen before. MedPace, that's a funny one because the stock was way up. Let's just take a look here. The stock was way up after earnings, popped 50% after earnings, and then the CEO just immediately dumped $22 million of the stock. And looks like he dumped another $18 million here. So certainly, he was very bullish on the call and then decides to dump a bunch of stock. And if we take a look, other insiders also sold the stock right after that pop. Yep, see, we got a handful of insiders selling the stock. It looks like, at least 5 there. And they hadn't sold the stock since way back here. So they don't really have, maybe the best history of timing their sales. Down here they had sold even though the stock was going up. But of course, after a massive pop and then deciding to sell some of the stock, kind of notable and just kind of funny. Looking through some of the other ones, Carvana, it looks like we have other insiders now selling Carvana, so we'll take a look at that. Yeah, a handful of insiders here selling Carvana. EchoStar went way up recently, so we'll take a look at that. Affirm Holdings, another interesting one where insiders are starting their 10b5-1 plan, so I'll probably come back and take a look at that. Maybe a look at Liquidia, and that seems to be the main. Yeah, nothing else super interesting catches the eye here. This one, we got a 10b5-1 plan, so we'll start at the top here. Not very interesting. Ares Capital Management. Previously timed sales, not particularly good, so I'm just kind of immediately going to run past that. MedPace, we just discussed. Again, 10b5-1's not normally interesting unless they make an abnormally large sale, which in this case, this does get a little interesting because the stock is up 60% in the last 3 months. His track record of selling, not particularly good. They just kind of look like normally scheduled sales. But the difference being that we can see this red bar here showing that this is a much larger sale than before. So he is purposely deciding to increase the size of his 10b5-1 sale after the stock has popped, which just historically speaking, that is one of the things we have studied. And when they increase their 10b5-1 sale by over 2x the average, the stock tends to perform worse on average going forward. Obviously, not 100% hit rate doesn't necessarily mean the stock will fall, but it is a signal for sure, and it could be worth looking into Vital Farms, especially if you own it and deciding if it's still something you want to hold on to. Now, the one caveat to this will be it does look like before he made an even larger sale. So he made a huge $188 million sale back in April of 2024, and the stock just continued to go up. So that was very clearly not a particularly well-timed sale. So, that would probably throw a little bit of a wrench in this, as he has made a large sale before and it didn't work out. MasterCard, obviously a popular company, but probably just a normal 10b5-1 plan if I had to guess. Not really much signal there from the CFO. FICO is an interesting one. We've got an unscheduled sale here for $9 million. Does look like, though, they kind of make, even though maybe it's not technically part of a 10b5-1, they've been pretty consistently selling. If we go take a look, let's go dive into this. Let's dive into FICO a little more. So it looks like he's been pretty consistently selling. Who else do we have selling here? The CFO also getting involved, which of course the CFO, some believe being the highest signal insider. Director looks like they sold back in May. Take a longer look here at the overall insiders. I don't know if there's really much to glean overall from the insiders at this company. Let's just go take a look at this William Lansing guy by himself, the CEO. Again, he was consistently buying, then took 2 months off here while the stock was at its low. Stock starts to curl back up here, makes another sale. So we definitely timed these sales pretty well. If we go a little longer term, not great timing there. And if we go way back here, not particularly good timing on any of this. If we look at the sales size overall, he's got 11 million, 10 million, 10. So it doesn't seem like it's necessarily an abnormally large sale either. So in this case, I'm not sure there is really much here. Let's just go verify. I wonder if, okay, so it is actually a 10b5-1 sale. They just didn't mark it down here in the footnotes, which is where we currently pull the 10b5-1 info from. Hopefully we'll get this included soon. Not much interesting there, I don't think. Go back here. CoreWeave, they're just continuing to sell from the IPO. So the IPO lockup has come on, so a bunch of insiders are selling because of that. We've got Progressive, another 10b5-1 sale. The timing on previous ones doesn't seem particularly good. It doesn't seem particularly large, so don't think that's super interesting. Caterpillar here, this is an interesting one where the exec chairman, Caterpillar, not a stock you see people selling very often. Looks like it's this guy's first ever sale of Caterpillar. So let's go take a look at the Caterpillar stock. Looks like we had some smaller sales here by a director and by a group president. And then some people down here, Gerald Johnson, who is this? Kind of nailed their purchases down here, a director and a director. So let's see if these were actually includes adjustments for dividends. Yeah, so not actually a dividend reinvestment. These were discretionary purchases, well timed. And then let's see, historically, I don't know if it doesn't really look like insiders have a particularly great track record of timing sales. As we mentioned, for this executive chairman, his first ever sale, so that is notable. Obviously, we'd prefer if he timed a bunch of sales well previously, but having no previous sales is also interesting. This is also only the second sale here from Caterpillar from this director. Let's see, last time they sold, pretty good timing, stock was down afterwards, and it looks like most of her sales has come as part of probably a director, I assume. Yeah, a director at FedEx, of which pretty good timing here as well. So, okay, but bad timing on this one down here, but pretty good timing overall, which we can also just see in the returns here where they say 9% returns. So this is an interesting one, a pretty stodgy old company up 30% in the last 6 months, 3 different insiders selling, at least one of whom has decent returns, and the first ever sale for the exec chairman. Definitely notable and worth taking a look at if you own Caterpillar. Matt Ishbia, the CEO, ton of selling. Timing doesn't seem great. We just move right on past that. 10B51 there. Synopsys here, the CEO as well at Synopsys doesn't seem to have particularly great timing. I mean, these were okay, I guess, but not a great history there. It is unscheduled, so maybe we'll just go check to see if anybody else is selling the stock here. Not recently. Looks like there are a handful of sales here. Not a ton of selling overall. Looks like, selling really picked up in June of 2024, which was pretty close to the top. Over the long time frame, I don't know if we can glean much insight from any of the selling there. So, we'll see. Maybe if some more people start selling here, it could get interesting. I don't think that's a particularly interesting one. Let's just we can speed up through some of these. You don't need to check all the 10B51s. This guy has now sold a handful of times here at Tutor Perini. Same last name, so probably related in some way, which also makes it more notable. Historically, though, not very good sales. Now Carvana, let's get into this one. The timing of Carvana, very tough because the stock is so popular and the momentum is so strong. However, obviously we are seeing just like an unbelievable amount of insider selling going on here, which we also saw previously on the run up. But the problem is, right, when you try to time these things, back here is actually what I meant on this run up. But the problem is, look how long this is, 2020 to 2021. So a full year of insider selling before the stock really dropped off. But then the insider selling did stop as it fell. And then insider buying started to pick up down here at the bottom, though the stock still fell another like 80% from there. So their timing has been a little tough. They've been a little early on the buys and sells here. But especially the dad, he's a 10% owner, a large owner, and the son, who's the CEO, they do a ton of selling when they think the stock's overvalued, a ton of buying when the stock is undervalued. And what's interesting here, so you can see the Ernest Garcia the third, and then the second is the dad down here. So you can see tons of insider selling by them, but very little insider selling by others. So starting to see a couple of 10B51 plans pop up here for 4 other insiders, it looks like or 3 other insiders. You got the VP of accounting, the CFO, and the COO turning on 10B51 plans, or at least, starting to sell a little more, which they did, I guess, a few months ago. So again, I don't think there's no like immediate really catalyst here or immediate play on Carvana. I just think it's notable that the dad and son have been selling forever, and a couple of insiders are getting involved. Could be signaling something at some point, but very, very hard to tell. So Affirm Holdings, this is another interesting one because we have it's a 10B51, so obviously they're scheduled, but you can see it's starting to pick up here a little bit. But what's notable is if we look at Max Levchin, the CEO, this is his first ever. He's never sold the stock before. You can just clearly see. Never sold the stock before, and now decides to turn on a 10B51 plan. Obviously, there are some concerns with just like in the economy with the consumer becoming a little weaker potentially. Now, on their earnings call, they said consumers are still strong, but obviously there's some concern depending on how the economy goes there. So seeing Max Levchin turn on a 10B51 plan for the first time is interesting. But then it's even more interesting when we look at this insider, who I believe is the chief accounting officer, who now also just recently turned on the 10B51 plan about a month ago in August, and then just made the second trade on that. But if we look historically, this is our only other 10B51 plan. She did sell way back in the early 2021, right after the IPO lockup, which in this case, I mean, the stock still did go down quite a bit after this sale as well, from 80 down to in the 50s. But this also could have just been, trying to get some money after the IPO lockup, just taking some money off the table. But the only other previous insider trades happened here in November, or previous 10B51 sales happened here in November at the very tippy top, around the $160 mark, before the stock fell all the way down under $10 over the next, even if we look only over the next year, it fell down to $16. So 90% after the last 10B51 plan sales. And so she's starting the 10B51 plan for only the second time ever. Very, very notable in my opinion at Affirm Holdings there, especially when you combine with, some of the concerns maybe about the consumers in the economy. What else do we have here? What else did we say we were going to take a look at? We took a look at Affirm. Liquidia is marginally interesting. So a bunch of 10B51 sales. Now, these were partially for taxes, but I believe if we take a look, okay, so this insiders was actually totally for taxes. So this is just a tax sale, so not that interesting. Let's see, that was not the button I meant to press. This one also looks like it's gonna just maybe be for tax sales. 5, the shares. Yeah, also just for tax sales. So mostly tax selling here, but there were a couple of insiders that did sell discretionary sales. So Paul Manning here with the big $19 million sale. The stock is way up, 66% in the last 3 months. He's a director. He's sold $19 million. His largest, not only his largest sale ever, his only sale ever. If we look through all these, tons of purchases. So some of them are doing it for just tax selling. But even if we just look at like this person, so they did sell for taxes here. If we look at number 8 down here, probably sold to cover taxes. Number 5 was part of a 10b5-1 plan, but was not for taxes. Same with number 4, was part of a 10b5-1 plan, but not for taxes. So pretty much all were scheduled sales or tax sales, except for the director who made the $19 million sale. That's the only reason it's notable, is because huge sale and then never sold the stock before. So let's switch over now. We can go take a look at purchases. Obviously, you can go to CEOWatcher.com if you want to look through the rest of these. Let's flip this to bullish only, and let's see what we have here. So Shattuck Labs, a couple insider buys here. We can just start. We'll just start with that. Stock's already up a ton, so I bet. I mean, what are we up just in the last day or two? Let me get today's updated. Well, down a little today, but already popped up 24% or whatever. Which I believe it actually popped because of the insider buying. People saw this buying and then kind of bought right away, essentially. So not much to do there, I don't think. What else do we have here? This one's an interesting one, because if we go take a look at Medalist Diversified, the CEO, I think, right? Yeah, the CEO bought $1.75 million of stock from these two directors who are selling directly to the CEO, which I haven't seen very often. So that'd be an interesting, I don't actually really know what to make of that. Also, that's the only selling. There's been a bunch of buying. Obviously, the buying hasn't been timed well, as the stocks, well, I guess maybe it was timed okay on the long term. The stock kept going down a little bit, another 10%. But now I guess it's up, 10% since then. So it's going okay. It's starting to inflect upward. Obviously, the CEO has been buying quite a bit. We have a couple other insiders that have been getting involved here. The CFO also bought some. And who do we have down here? Somebody with no title. So don't know what will probably tell us on the controller. So some insider buying going on here, which is interesting. I mean, REITs aren't really my play. Historically, doesn't look like they've timed the purchases very well. So the only thing that's kind of interesting here is the CEO directly buying the stock from some directors is pretty interesting. Moving on, let's just see here. We got Biodesix, a $1.5 million purchase in the healthcare space, which has obviously been pretty interesting here. Buying the dip and large purchases. However, previous times buying, they've got larger purchases back here. The track record doesn't seem to be particularly good longer term on the buys, so not very interesting there. Resideo Technologies. Now this one's going to be interesting because we've called out quite a few times in these videos. We had CD&R Channel Holdings buying the stock here, which is particularly notable because it was right before earnings, and so obviously I don't really think they should have been allowed to buy right then, but they did. And the stock actually popped 14%, not on earnings, but right before earnings, some news came out that popped at 15%. And then gave back about most of those gains, and then popped another 5% on earnings. Then it gave back those gains too. And then ever since then, it's been on a steady increase. So CD&R Channel Holdings has been buying, and now we've got another insider stepping in, another director stepping in to buy the stock as well. And his timing has been incredible on previous purchases. So look, he bought back here in 2019 and then in mid 2020, and then the stock's up over 100%, which we can just look at, after a year. Stock's been up on average over 100% in the following year, which would be those two purchases down there. And then back here as well, the stock he bought at, what is this, $19, and then like somewhere around the $19 to $20 range, and the stock's up 50% since the beginning of the year, since then as well. So the only downside here is that all of his previous purchases, as you can see, were after dips with the stock down. In this case, he is buying, the stock is way up 60% in the last 3 months, buying the stock. Now, it is a building company, which is interesting because of the Trump administration starting to talk about, maybe needing to do some stimulus in housing, which could definitely benefit them, which makes it interesting. And a fantastic track record, obviously. He's already buying a stock that's way up. So that's maybe the only downside there. What else do we have here? Advanced Flower Group. We've now seen this guy. He's bought the stock 3 times now in the last week. And then his brother, I assume, or somebody else named Tannenbaum also bought one of these days. So continued insider buying there and a decent track record of buying historically. Though, I mean, not really. Bought right after the dip here, but then it kept continuing to dip and then bought back here, which had a little better returns. So yeah, I guess actually maybe not the most interesting, at least with his purchasing at Advanced Flower Capital, not the most interesting purchases. We've got Richard Wallman here at CECO International. I don't know, whatever they want to call themselves. More interesting buying here. The timing seems to be okay. I don't know if it's necessarily anything to write home about. I assume he's also an insider at a different company. So Charles River, maybe he has slightly better returns with his purchases at Charles River. This one went pretty well. Roper Technologies, let's see. He's timed his sales, time to sales okay, or at least his most recent sale, timed these purchases okay. So, insider returns on average are about 9%. Though, the win rate is not, it's pretty good. What is that? Probably 70% or something, 65%. So if we look over some of the other time frames, I guess he seems to, on average, time these out pretty well, which definitely is kind of interesting. So let's then see, did anybody else at CECO or SECO or whatever? Now we have some insider selling, so you never like to see both an insider selling and an insider buying. And the insider selling was way larger than this purchase, which actually that would have been a better thing to look at real quick. Is the size of the transaction. 199,000 is definitely on the lower end, just kind of scrolling through these. So I don't know if it's really the most interesting. I think the other insider buying and the fact that's not super big probably dampens it a little bit. Avidia Bancorp, this is one we've been seeing for quite a while. Just a ton of purchases. The company just IPO'd at the beginning of August, and now we're up to 23 total purchases by 8 insiders. So certainly notable and probably worth taking a look at if you're interested in banks at all. So for the most part, I don't know if there's anything else here that really sticks out. We start to get to, like we mentioned, not a ton of insider buying going on. Definitely heavier on the insider selling recently. So that'll probably be all for today. You can go to CEOWatcher.com, see all the insider trades, from any time period and sort them however you want. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow.